Hey there everyone, and a very warm welcome to this lesson on musical rests. So far in this course, we've been looking into how we represent different sounds in music notation. We've looked at the different markings that show us how high or low in pitch these sounds should be, and also how long in beats they should last for in the music. But it's also important to remember that some of the most exciting elements of music can be where there are no sounds going on. Silences can be incredibly powerful in a piece of music, and so we're going to need a way to show when there's nothing going on in the music at that particular point. And just the same way that we can use different symbols to show notes that last for 4 beats, 2 beats, 1 beat, and fractions of a beat, there are also a set of symbols in music notation that tell us that we should play nothing for a particular number of beats. And so let's have a look at these now. So here we have 5 new symbols to learn, and these symbols tell us that we should rest or play nothing in the music for a particular number of beats. And they map directly on to the different types of notes that we've learnt already. So you'll remember that we learnt about something called a whole note. And it looks a bit like this. We learned that this type of note lasts for 4 beats. This symbol is that note's corresponding rest, and we call it a whole rest. And so just the same way that a whole note is telling us to play a note and then hold it for 4 beats, a whole rest is telling us to be silent or play nothing for 4 beats. The next type of note we learnt was the half note. It looks a little bit like this. This note's corresponding rest looks like this and sits on the third line up of the stave. And again, it doesn't matter whether we're using a treble stave or a bass stave or even a different type of stave. If we want the person playing this music to do nothing, to be silent for 2 beats, what we need to do is use what we call a half rest. Which will last for 2 beats in the music. The next type of note that we learnt has a filled-in note head and a stem, just like this. And it's funny because actually this symbol here looks rather similar to it. And it's known as a quarter rest. Whenever we see this symbol in a piece of music, it's telling us that we're going to be silent and play nothing for 1 beat. So what did we learn next? We started to look at types of notes that last for less than a beat, fractions of a beat. The first one of these was the 8th note, which lasts for half a beat, and looks a bit like this, very similar to the quarter note, but with this tail added on. Just like all the notes we've seen up to this point, it has its own rest symbol, and we call this the 8th rest. When we see this symbol in a piece of music, we know that we're going to rest for exactly half a beat. And finally, for this lesson, although this isn't the total range of notes and rests that we find in music, we have the 16th note. This looks very similar to an 8th note, but it also has a second tail on the stem of the note, just like this. And as we learnt earlier on, this type of note will last for a quarter of a beat. So this note, of course, has a corresponding rest, and it's known as a 16th rest. And you might have guessed already that this rest will last for a quarter of a beat. So there we have it. These 5 simple symbols tell us about different ways we can insert silence or rests into a piece of printed music. These can be really important, and we see this very often in, for example, orchestral music. It's very unusual for the brass players who sit right at the back of the orchestra to be involved in the music all of the time. Instead, composers save them up as a kind of special effect to give an even bigger and louder sound to perhaps the loudest part of the piece. So it's really important that the musicians playing those brass instruments have an idea of how long they're going to have to rest or wait for until it's their time to play. And we do just that by using a combination of these symbols.